France, a country known for its elegance, high fashion, French cuisine, and famous landmarks like the Eiffel Tower, is the third biggest economy in Europe and the seventh largest economy in the world. You may ask yourself how France managed to reach this level in terms of its economy. Well, I'd say that it's due to the groups that make up the economy. The French economy is made up of a strong government, strong business, strong trade unions, and tremendously strong people. There is a constant opposition and negotiation between these groups, but despite this, they managed to make things work. This opposition, and this has led to the progress in the nation. One such example would be the many benefits that the French enjoy. The French population enjoy a free universal healthcare system, free education, and good working conditions like a 35-hour work week, 6 weeks annual vacation, parental leave, and a retirement age of 62. These benefits were fought for by the French population over many years. You may have seen Yellow Vest protests in France calling for economic justice and noticed that the French people are known for always striking. However, in reality, it is not that much when compared to other nations such as Denmark and Iceland. Despite this, one of the reasons the French are known for striking is the way in which it is done. They make it really visible, whether it will be workers wearing bright yellow vests or farmers driving convoys of tractors on the streets of Paris. The French protests are not afraid to make themselves heard. If we were to start talking about the French Revolution, it would be an entirely new video. But in short, it sought to completely change the relationship between the rulers and those they governed, and to redefine the nature of political power to ultimately improve conditions for those living in France. Whilst there are many things the French people have to be grateful for, not all aspects of the French economy are doing well. One such thing would be their unemployment rate, especially amongst the younger generation. Despite not being as bad as other countries like Spain, it is still very high for a developed nation and one of the highest in Europe. In fact, the unemployment rate has not fallen below 7% in over 30 years, and it is clear that France has a structural unemployment issue. Further, the employment rate measuring the extent that the available labour is used is approximately 65% in France. This is low compared to other countries like Germany, where it's over 75%. This points to a bigger issue. That is that a smaller proportion of the population power, the social security measure that many enjoy, which means a large number of people are not contributing to the economy whilst enjoying public benefits. This means the social security net responsible for helping the unemployed is powered by a smaller proportion of the population. In other words, a high number of people are not contributing to the economy while using the public benefits. There are multiple reasons behind the unemployment issue. We will discuss 4 of the major ones. French work fewer hours compared to other countries, 35 hours a week, which is 5 hours less than the UK. The minimum wage in France is €1,554, which is one of the top 5 in the world if we ignore the micronations. There's always been a correlation between the minimum wage and the unemployment rate. In simple words, when wages are low, businesses hire more people. When wages are high, businesses pull back and hire fewer employees. High employment or high wages? Which one is better? Well, you decide. This sounds like a trade-off, which is very common in economics. When you fix one thing, the other becomes a problem. But can we have the best of both worlds? Now, why can't you just lower the minimum wage to fix the unemployment issue? Why? Because there would be protests in France. In short, once you give something to the citizens, you can't take it away. So our question is unemployment really an issue? Because it seems like, intentionally or unintentionally, France has chosen to keep the wages high compared to having more workers employed. Another perspective to ignore the high minimum wage is its relation with costs of living, which is different in every other country. France is no Switzerland or Norway when it comes to the cost of living, but it is still in the top 20 list. So, lowering the wages is a big no, as well as comparing wages of different countries. Another factor for the high unemployment rate is related to the education sector that produces more graduates in fields, the arts and social sciences, that are not in sync with the job market. Although this factor is true in many developed nations and has not raised an issue yet. It is common sense that if you have to discourage something, you put high taxes on it. That's why cigarettes have high taxes. But why would you put high taxes on employment? France has one of the highest payroll taxes in the world. Employers pay a big chunk of these taxes compared to employees, which directly impacts the job market, as employers need to figure out how many employees they can hire based on the cash available. While you can certainly argue that this money goes to support healthcare and retirement benefits, taxing employment is still ridiculous while complaining about the high unemployment rate in the country. The fourth factor is strong labour laws, which no doubt have their benefits. It's difficult to fire people, so the businesses make it difficult to hire them in the first place. Businesses hire only if it's absolutely necessary and there is no way around it. Once you are hired, there are limited working hours and long lunch breaks that result in limited output compared to what they could have produced otherwise. If you sum up all of these factors, it's still less of a problem for big corporations compared to small businesses. Small businesses hesitate to create new jobs to avoid considerable penalties for laying off any employees. They are turned towards other options that include outsourcing work to foreign entities or resort to offering temporary contracts instead of full-time employment. Although only a little above 10% of the employees are members of unions, they do have too much power. This makes the governments of any political leaning give in to the union demands to keep the popularity and stability. The country has taken some reforms in recent years by lowering the tax burden on businesses, but it will take a few years to see any significant results. The French economy is robust in many sectors including aerospace, automotive, railways, power generation, defence, as well as cosmetics, luxury goods, pharmaceuticals, agriculture and hospitality. So there are a variety of sectors. France has a complete economy. From satellites to nukes and submarines, from planes to cars, from ships to trains, the French economy is diverse enough to produce almost anything it wants to, with resources in hand. Only a handful of other countries can say they have this capability. Also, France is the 5th largest exporter country in the world. This country sits high on the Innovation Index and has the 4th highest number of Nobel Prize winners. When talking about the economic drivers in France, you stumble upon what's called dirigisme, which is not just the regulatory or minimum intervention, but a more directive role by the state. It has the country's biggest strength as well as its biggest weakness. France may not be the number one by tourist spending, but it's the most visited country in the world. The travel and tourism sector contributes to nearly 10% of the total GDP, but it is one of the most important sectors as it creates a soft image for the country. The influx of tourists is also of great importance for the French luxury market that has a huge fan base among Americans and Chinese tourists buying those fancy designer bags and footwear labelled Made in France. The charm of the City of Lights, Paris, makes your social media profiles look good with those dreamy photos. The culture, fashion and landscape has earned France an international reputation as the world's most popular destination for tourists. France has not recorded a current account surplus in over a decade. The country has been witnessing a current account deficit since 2006, which means the country spends more on imports than it receives on exports. More simply, there is money going out of the country than there is coming in. France has a high debt that nearly went to the same amount as their total GDP, although it went even higher during the COVID pandemic, crossing 150% of their total GDP. One of the reasons for this debt is government spending. The country's government spends a lot of money. In fact, the government of France is the biggest spender of money among OECD's 37 member countries. The debt is made possible with lower interest rates, which is okay for now, but it could get stinky in the future, more than the stinkiest French cheese. A good case can be made for the presence of economic nationalism in France. Their innate capacity to support local products, the industries like AXA, Renault, BNP, etc. are closely interlaced into politics. Foreign companies trying to compete with these industries have a difficult time getting into the same market, so there is a high barrier to entry. France has historically higher corporate tax rates. The high corporate tax rates was one of the many reasons for high unemployment, as the business end up exporting the jobs, outsourcing manufacturing to low-wage countries, and offshoring. But in the last few years, they have managed to lower the taxes on businesses to make the economy more business-friendly. France, being a member state of the EU, struggles against competitive markets, offering high-quality products like Germany. On the other hand, Eastern and Southern European countries compete against the country of lower prices. While French companies are facing issues to gain market share internationally and somewhat struggling with competitiveness, the country has seen an increase in foreign direct investment in recent years that makes it a more feasible place for foreign companies to do business. The country's energy demand is primarily fulfilled by nuclear energy that accounts for above a third-fourth of the total electricity consumption. Heavily focused on the nuclear energy sector makes it one of the smallest carbon emitters among the top industrialized countries. France is the third largest weapon exporter in the world. The country has received criticism for selling weapons to war-torn regions which have witnessed human rights abuses. France, despite not having gold mines, has the fourth biggest gold reserves in the world. The Bank of France also stores gold in Paris as a custodian on behalf of other central banks. The country has also been accused of obtaining some of its gold reserves and wealth from the African countries it had colonized. As we discussed earlier, the legal length of the working week in France is 35 hours. But before you call the French lazy, you should know that they are highly productive. According to the data of OECD, France seems to compete quite well and even beat some other countries when it comes to GDP per hour worked. Although a counterclaim to this argument could be that France has fewer people hired from the total number of available people to work, so they are just using the most productive people. But you could certainly deduce that French are not as lazy as it looks to the outside world. It could have something to do with how they value the quality of life. While the economy of France has its issues and it's not perfect like anything else in life, France has a lot to be grateful for. Other than that, we hope you enjoyed this video. We will try to reply to everyone in the comment section below. If I missed out anything about the beautiful France, please let me know. Please like, subscribe and share to support the channel.